Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. My guest today is 19-year-old Ella Brinen, who's working on developing a foster youth Bill of Rights and garnering support at the state capitol. We've invited her to the show to talk about the process of writing a bill, hear her advice on aging out of the foster care system, and learn about the moment she realized she could use her voice for good. Ella Brinen, thanks for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Of course. I'm really excited to be able to speak to everyone about this process.
We're really happy to have you here. Okay, so bring us up to speed. What is the Foster Youth Bill of Rights?
So the Foster Youth Bill of Rights is a bill that I wrote starting last January, so January 2024. And it is a document that consolidates existing rights that are Tennessee Code or DCS policy, as well as a few new rights that other states have for foster youth into one document. And the goal is to make it accessible to foster youth, to caseworkers, and to everyone else who is involved with the youth, so that they are empowered to know their rights and call out violations of their rights. So the goal is that this will be bones as well for future legislation. So even though it's going to be a little bit more general, like, for example, there might be something about like unnecessary and excessive medication, which is more general. The goal is that groups who have interest in that specific area can build more specific legislation on it. But making rights accessible to youth is really, really important right now.
Why is it important to you?
So when I was in foster care, I did not know that we had any rights, and I didn't know how to look for them. Right now, you have to go onto like the Tennessee like state website and like be very intentional about searching for very specific things. It's really difficult. And realistically, the state of foster care in Tennessee is abysmal. And I would not say it's any specific person's fault. But there are so many consistent rights violations. And it can't fly anymore. We are hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation that will continue long into the future about our responsibility as Tennesseans to these children. Because on every legal document that I had, it says, my guardian is a state of Tennessee. And so I'm starting to try to remind these people that as the representatives and the elected officials of the state of Tennessee, these are your children. And if you would not put up with your biological child being locked in solitary confinement because they're crying, then you need to vote for this bill. So reminding people that these children have rights, have a voice, and reminding my siblings that some of the things they've gone through are not okay, and it's time that they speak up.
I'm curious, explain the moment to me when you had the idea to write this. Were you sitting at home? Describe the scene to me.
So, one of my best friends, Bethel, and I had decided we were gonna do youth in government our senior year, which is it's like a fun activity. We're both interested in law, in some capacity, and we did not know like what to do. And it was getting close to the deadline to submit a bill, as well as when I was aging out, because the deadline was January 10th. I aged out January 30th of 2024. And I started noticing how nothing was being done right, ethically, any of those things. And I was like, is our foster youth entitled to rights? Like, do we have rights? And I Googled it, and at least 16 other states have a foster youth bill of rights. And I was like, why don't we write this for youth in government? Let's just see. And it passed unanimously. It won an award, all of those things. And it was a really long bill. Like, we were very specific. And so that's when I wrote it. But then the moment I decided that this needed to be something I pursued in the legislature was when one of my foster siblings, my Kyria, she ran away, and that was a really difficult time for me because I had just moved out of the foster home and into my new apartment, and she was just such a good kid. And from what I understand, she was placed in a facility, and she was 10, and so taking away a child's life because they were scared and they ran away, that was the moment I knew that I wanted to leave foster care behind me. Like, it was a really painful chapter of my life and I never wanted to revisit it. But that was the moment that I knew it's my responsibility as someone who knows what's happening, as someone who has the resource of time. It was my job to do something. And that's when I started badgering representatives about sponsoring it.
Tell me about the bond you have with your foster siblings.
A bond with foster siblings is something I don't know that people outside foster care could ever fully understand, because when you're put in a home and you're told that, you know, if you make a mistake, you don't have another placement, you're going on night to night, or like you're just you know you're replaceable. Doesn't matter what anyone says to me, I know I'm replaceable, and as soon as I make a mistake, I'm out of that home. And so it's really hard to connect with other people in the way that you connect with your foster siblings, because you know it's you and them against the world, against the system, against the caseworkers, against if it's a bad foster parent, against the foster parent. That alliance is unbreakable. And even though I aged out and they're not my biological siblings, I mean, I'm going to see them literally right after this. I love those kids so much. And if there is anything I could ever do to make their life just a little bit less difficult, that is my responsibility. That is something I would do happily. And that's part of the reason I'm doing this bill.
So you write this bill and you draft it. I understand you end up getting two fairly influential lawmakers to sponsor. Representative Mary Littleton, who's the chair of the Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee in the House, and Senator Pharrell Hale, who is the chair of the Senate Ethics Committee. Tell me what it was like meeting them and what the process of working them has been like.
So I initially started working with Hale's office. So I reached out to them in July. I had really doctored the bill at that point. I had rewrote it probably 4 times. And I reached out to him after I had finished my research with other foster youth, because my experience, I know my experience was difficult, but it's not a comprehensive experience. Like I was never in a residential facility. Other youth were. So I reached out to all of them. And once I had what I felt like was a rough draft of a final product, I started doing research on who had some sort of stake in this. So Hill had introduced quite a few bills that pertain to adoption, foster parents, foster care. And having seen a history of that, not just like a one-off, that's when I started going in, because they don't even start drafting legislation until I think it's like September, November. So I reached out in July because I was like, this needs to happen, and early bird gets the worm. So I left quite a few voice messages, sent quite a few emails, and they were like, yeah, we'll do this. So that's kind of how that started. And then his office is connected with Representative Mary Littleton. And they have like agreements as far as like what bills she'll sponsor for them and whatever. So once we knew we were moving forward with this, they reached out and got her to sponsor. And well, I reached out, but you know.
What's it been like getting to know them?
It's been a really eye-opening experience for me, because so first of all, I'm a teenager, and I know that sometimes I see things in black and white. I'm a progressive. I'm very progressive. And I definitely had preconceived notions, but I'm learning to find common ground with people where I didn't think I could, because to me, this is the cause that we both care about. We both care about these children. And so I needed to set aside my other views to pursue this goal. And that's actually been a really transformative experience for me, because I love people. I love humans. That is my driving force, is I just love people. And there are some times where people have certain views that just are a turn off for me. And I'm like, I can't stand you. And having an avenue to connect with someone who I otherwise wouldn't, that's huge for me. And so this is honestly, it's been a really great experience. And they've been good to work with.
What you've described about, being able to set aside some of your other views to get this done is not only adulting, that's grown-ass adulting. You're ahead of the game with that one. Okay, so you're knocking on office doors. I'm curious, like when you introduced yourself as a former foster youth, would people have preconceived notions about what that meant and what that meant about you?
Yes. Also, there have been quite a few people where I say, hi, I'm Ella Brinen. I'm a former foster youth. This is why I'm here. And they just do not get that I'm a former foster youth. Like, there's 2 or 3 times where they're just like, it's so great that you care about those kids. And I'm like, I am those kids. Thank you. But that is a wake-up call for me, because foster youth are very underrepresented in these places, but just everywhere that's above a high school education. Like any place that you have to go to get a degree, or like any space where you need a degree, you don't find foster youth there, because less than 3% nationally obtain a post-secondary education. So these spaces are spaces that are not made for us. And I think to them, when I come in and I know what I'm talking about, and I know the process, and I know and I'm articulate, that's kind of like a mind blown moment for them. But it can be really stressful, because I do feel like I'm an ambassador for foster youth, especially with people who have who are green on the issue. It's just, and there are people that I'm aware of who have sponsored bills that are, to put foster youth who are having mental health issues in detention facilities. And going in there and needing to present myself, like I have to try really hard to earn credibility with those people. Because there are plenty of people who literally just think foster youth are delinquents, or like the majority of foster youth belong in a detention center and the juvenile justice system instead of in foster care. And so I do have to fight that. And it can be frustrating, because I think there's this idea that those are different. You're just special. You're the exception. And it's like, no, if you knew what I was like in foster care, I would have been the one affected by those bills. I would have. So this idea that I'm not a delinquent, the rest of them are, it's just not accurate. And I can't tell those people that. I can't be like, yeah, actually, I did a lot of stuff that y'all wouldn't be happy about when I was in foster care, but you don't understand what it's like to be in a state of survival when the state has rights to you. Like, this state was my parent. So yeah, so it can be really difficult to fight those preconceived notions sometimes.
On paper, it's a pretty clear process of how a bill becomes a law. But the real process, a lot of it is unwritten. It's kind of like, to me, it's like the protocol is held in a secret chamber and things.
Yes.
So in reality, it's like, who's the sponsor, what else is on their agenda and things, and who's for it, and what can people offer to the bill. And I know your bill has only recently been filed, so it's really, really still early. Mm-hmm. But what has surprised you about this process so far?
Honestly, to me, in my brain, foster care is low-hanging fruit for bipartisanship. Like, you would think that it would be easy to make people care about children or, you know, some of us, not all of us, but some of us are literally orphans. And you would think it would not be difficult to make people care. It is so difficult. It is so difficult because I can sit down and explain to someone what foster care looked like for me or for a friend. And I can tell people that, but I cannot make them care. And to me, I think children are low-hanging fruit of like, yeah, you know what? Like, kids are suffering. We should fix this. And I still don't understand why it's why it's controversial. I don't. So that has been really surprising for me, especially because, you know, not all, but a lot of people collect kind of like causes, like little pins, that they can wear to show that they're a good person. Yeah. You know, especially in the legislature. And I'm actually not talking about my sponsor. They do care about this issue, but other people, it's just like you would think that being a champion for the children would be good for them politically. And they just don't want to acknowledge that there's a problem, because our state, we want to be the best for foster youth, and realistically we are the worst or one of the worst. We are very low on that hierarchy of states. So like, but we have to do the work to get to being the best state. And if you're not willing to put in the work and you're just silencing former foster youth, then like, yeah. So that's been weird.
Would you say, like, talking to these people who have these pins of causes as a display of soft power, would you say it's really giving you a firsthand education on power brokering and how that goes down at the Capitol?
I don't know. Yes. Yeah, I would. And it's just like, I also think that there are people who really like to like grandstand for an issue. But then when it comes to doing the actual work, they're not there. They're not helping write the bill. They're not giving you pointers of how to lobby it. And I think that's also just been an interesting lesson on also adulting. Because I'm new to being an adult. There are things I've been doing my whole life, especially in foster care, that are very adult. But like being on my own and realizing that like, wow, like a lot of these people just pretend to care to get you out of their office. So that's been really interesting. And the people you see on social media and in the news and all of those things, like really championing an issue, a lot of times they're the ones who do the least work or are even like the roadblocks to getting it done.
All right. So what do you want other young people or folks of any age really to know about lobbying for change at the state capitol and what they can do?
We need to take away this idea that there's a wall between the people and the Capitol. We need to remember who pays them. Your taxes pay these people. You just have to reach out. If there is a cause that you care enough about and you are willing to put in the work, you show up for it. You cannot, as a young person and as an adult, you can't change the world. You cannot fix every single thing that's wrong. And a lot of times it's overwhelming that there's so much hurt in the world and you cannot fix it. But you need to find something that you care enough about and you have a lot of passion to put towards, and you need to show up and you need to pursue that in the Capitol, in whatever spaces you're in, because it isn't your responsibility, especially as a young person, to fix a system, but it is your responsibility as a human being to try and make the world better. So you just got to show up and message these people.
You're 19.
Yeah.
You have a pretty cool tattoo.
Thank you.
Tell me about it.
So I got it with one of my best friends who I met through my internship at the Nashville Public Defender's Office, Michaela. She took me to get it 2 weeks after I aged out, and it's a hermit crab. I designed it, and it symbolizes to me, I felt like while I was in foster care, I carried my home on my back. I kept everything in my backpack. I kept everything in my locker at school. And hermit crabs carry their homes on their backs. And when I aged out, I knew that was the end. of my time carrying my home with me. But I don't ever want to like forget that and forget that that is the reality for so many youth across Tennessee and across the country.
All right, coming up, we're going to continue to talk more with Ella Brinen about the circumstances in foster care that led her desire to make this change. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com. Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. My guest is Ella Brinen from Nashville. She's 19 years old and involved in advocacy for foster youth, including lobbying for a Tennessee Foster Youth Bill of Rights. Ella, again, thank you for being here.
Of course, it's my honor.
Okay, so your big part of why you're so passionate about this project is because you were in foster care as a teenager. You talked about it a little bit up there. But until fairly recently, you aged out last year.
Yes.
How's the past 365 days been for you?
They have been, and I mean this, they have been some of the best, actually, the best days of my life have been in these last 365 days. On my 18th birthday, my teachers at MLK High School, they threw me a birthday party to celebrate that I was aging out. And right before that, I had signed out of DCS custody. They came, they gave me a paper. They were like, have a nice life. And I went, and immediately I was surrounded by that community that I had built. And I think that's the moment I knew that this was going to be a really good year for me. And I had started working on the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. I moved into my apartment. That was a really stressful time. It was the first 2 weeks after I aged out, because I was given none of my documents. Not a birth certificate, not insurance, not a state ID, all of which are DCS policy to give. And if you can't prove you exist, you can't get housing. Fun fact. So I was really just in kind of a state of panic, state of free fall when I aged out. But once I got my housing secured, going from a foster home with lots of kids and all of those things, and like, my life was such that I went to work in the morning. I opened 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. I walked to school. And then sometimes I would go home and close. But you're talking to customers, you're talking to people the whole time. And then I would go home to a loud foster home. Going to a silent apartment, I literally the first 3 nights, I would just cry because I was so happy. I've never slept better in my life. So that was incredible. And then after that, I graduated from high school, which was such a huge moment for me because it had been so difficult to get there. And knowing something that weighs heavy on a lot of foster kids is this knowledge that you are alone. And at my high school graduation, not only did I have all of my teachers there, obviously they're the staff, and they came, and I'm very, very close with them. But our district gives us 10 tickets. People were asking me if they could buy some off of me because they didn't think I would have people showing up. Wow. I actually had to buy 2. That's how many people I had show up for me. I had my mentors with the public defender's office, who I love dearly. I had people I had volunteered with at a local animal sanctuary show up for me. I had this huge show of support, and when I walked across the stage, it wasn't silent. I had people cheering for me, and that meant so much to me. And from there, working on the bill, getting into routines, becoming independent, and knowing that nobody has control over my life except for me. I know where I will wake up tomorrow, and it's in my own bed. It's not going to be in a DCS office if something goes wrong. So these last 365 days, even though it's been a lot of like, there's been a lot of like bumps in the road, they've been genuinely the best of my life.
You know, when I'm 19, I'm living in a dorm with 100 other dudes and we're acting like idiots.
Yeah.
You are, seriously, like I'm saying, you're like grown-ass adulting on your own. What's it like living by yourself? So,
I guess I don't fully live by myself. I have a very cute dog named Turtle.
Okay.
But it was an adjustment. I was very happy about it, and then it got really quiet, and I was like, well, getting a dog. She kind of fell into my lap. I take in strays because I project onto them. I'm like, oh, I don't want you to go to a shelter or a bad foster home. Let me take you in. Mm-hmm. But from that, it's just, it's so amazing to have autonomy over my life. Like, and I'm sure college students experience that in a different way, where it's like you're coming out from under your parents' house and now it's like, woo, go party. For me, it's like I can live a normal life if I choose. And that's really important because that's what I wanted in high school, was to be the same as my peers. But realistically, when I'm working constantly, when I'm constantly worried that the next meeting with my caseworker is going to mean I go to a facility, my sleep schedule in high school was not conducive to an education. I'm really lucky I had the teachers that I did, because they gave me the space to like be a teenager, and like a lot of times I had to sleep in class and stuff like that. But being able to be normal, if I choose, that has been the most amazing thing these past 365 days.
How would your peers in high school react when they learned that you were in foster care?
For the most part, it was hard. I tried not to show them or tell them. There's a few at first that knew. So I lived with my best friend before I entered foster care. So obviously she knew, she supported me through it. And so it was not something I talked about until probably like end of junior year. It was something I couldn't like avoid. Because people would ask me to come over to my house and hang out. And I'm like, well, so I'm going to have to explain a few things to you and also no. But there were a few people who actually had some pretty awful things to say, where like there was one particular individual who decided to like joke about me being homeless because I was a foster kid. And it's like, so that's actually not the same thing. But for the most part, people were supportive. The thing that infuriated me most was like when people would pity me, because I believe to pity is to degrade. And it was just frustrating when people would be like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Like, are you okay? Yeah. Yes, I am. And like I've fought so hard to get respect from people that like it was difficult, and I had an aversion to telling people for a long time because I thought they wouldn't respect me. Did your foster siblings, I understand what you're saying about people offering that fake pity. It's almost like a verbal pin. Yes. That they're wearing, exactly. You know? Did your foster siblings express difficulty in trusting others with the information about their situation? So some of them were they would be open with their coaches about it. Some of them just, they don't like to talk about it. It's a touchy subject. I think really it depends on circumstances under which you came into custody and relationships with parents, like biological parents, and like if those were still standing, because that can be really, really difficult to navigate, especially as like a young child, you know, that is a really difficult thing to go through. If you could describe your foster care experience in one sentence, what would it be? Tumultuous, and it was just a free fall. I was just constantly free falling, and it was terrifying. Just to know that there's all these people around you that say they care, but you don't know who you can go to, and you don't know what happens if you're moved from your placement. You might go to Knoxville. I was told that if I lost my placement, I would go to Knoxville. And I had built a community. And so it was like tumultuous and terrifying and awful. yeah.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. My guest is Ella Brinen. She's 19. She aged out of the foster care system. She got to work, and now she's lobbying at the state capitol for a foster youth Bill of Rights. Okay, there's a lot of big news stories and investigations that we hear kind of once a year about foster care and what's happening in these facilities, in these youth facilities. It kind of bubbles up, and then we don't hear about it for a while until the next big investigation. Why do you think it's so hard to make meaningful improvements in our foster care system?
You have to remember the demographic that you're dealing with. So these are children. Children have the least amount of rights in our country. And I'm not saying prisoners should be treated badly, but they have more rights than these kids. And you have to remember that the person who advocates for children outside of foster care is their parent. So when you don't have outcry from parents whose child was brutalized in a facility, those things go unreported, because I've met youth who are in facilities and the only contact that they have is with their caseworker. And if their caseworker is complicit in what's happening, nothing gets reported. If there's a sexual assault, it does not get reported. And I think it's really easy to write off foster youth as delinquents, as so traumatized that they don't know what's happening. And that's not accurate. There are plenty of foster youth who have intellectual disabilities and stuff, but there are plenty who don't. And we are not listened to. But realistically, it's because there's not an outcry from parents. There isn't.
Do you have faith in people who are ignorant to what foster care is like? Do you have faith that they can understand the challenges that you all are experiencing to the point where they actively get involved?
I want to emphasize I love people. I love people so much, and I have a lot of faith in our ability to connect with each other and to empathize. And I would say when I first came into foster care, I would say no. I was a huge pessimist. I didn't let anyone in. But now, with the communities that I've built that are so important to me, I've chosen family who had no idea what foster kids are going through, but who walked with me through foster care and are now outspoken about what's going on. Because they did it, I do believe that there's hope.
So you currently have trust in adults.
Yes. And that is something that was really, really difficult to build. But when I first entered foster care, I felt so alone. I had my best friend and I loved her, but it's really different to have a friend and have mentors or parents or whatever. And it's trying to figure out who you are, how to do life, how to be in school, how to work, how to do all of these things. I had no idea what I was doing. And I realized I just felt so alone and I was becoming bitter. And I didn't want that for myself. So I reached out. And my teachers at MLK, I can't underscore how much they changed my life. I would not be here today if it was not for those people supporting me. And then in the summers, I was an intern at the Nashville Public Defender's Office. And those people really shaped me. I want to be a public defender. That's my dream. And I love those people. I love Georgia, Crandall, all of them, Britannia. They just were always there for me, and they never judged me. That's the other thing is when you're in foster care, adults that are system involved, they know all your trauma. They know everything you've done wrong, every placement you've been at, and every reason why you've left that placement. So you come in and there's nothing to share. They know your whole life story and you're in a neat little box that you can't break out of. But I had the opportunity, especially with the Public Defender's Office, to be authentically myself without all of these labels attached to me. And so I confidently can say these people don't love me because they pity me. They love me because they know who I am. And also it doesn't hurt that we're public defenders. So you see a lot. You see a lot with that job. So there's not much I can say that can faze my mentors. They're like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ella.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get it. Well, so what advice do you have for kids, young people who are aging out of foster care?
my practical advice is plan. You need to know how to plan because you need to dream and you need to have goals, but you need to understand that the system will do everything that it can to break you and make sure you don't achieve those goals, and then they'll blame you for it. So you need to plan. So say you want to be a doctor. Okay. Now plan down to the T. Everything you have to do to get there, because and have 6 backup plans. And it's not fair. It's not fair that is what we have to do, but you need to be able to plan. But then also you need to find your community, whatever that looks like, whether it's at a local community center, whether it's your teachers, whether it's an internship, whether it's volunteering. You need to find those people, because foster kids, like I want every foster kid who will listen to this to know this. You can do anything. You can. But you shouldn't have to do it alone. I know I probably could have figured it out by myself, but it would have been so much more difficult, and it would have been so much more lonely. And you deserve people to help you through this phase in your life and to stick with you beyond it. And lastly, we are expected to grow up so fast. We are. And it's so sad to see the foster youth that I know become parentified at age 7 or whatever. Like, don't let DCS trick you into thinking you're not entitled to being a teenager, to being a child. Because you are. You just have to be careful, because we don't get second chances. So it's just, you have to hold those two truths. And that's why you need a community to help you navigate all of that.
So what advice would you have for adults who know a young person who's about to age out of foster care?
Reach out. Be that person. And know that there is a spectrum of youth who age out. I call it from hyper-independence to like complacency. Either the system has done nothing for them and they've had to do everything, or the system has done everything for them and they don't know how to do anything. Both of them need help. And we have a hard time trusting adults. So if at first that's not something they're interested in, keep showing up for them, but don't show up for them and be like, hey, it's just because you're aging out. Show up for them because you love them as a person, because you have connections that you can share with them. Because, I mean, like, with my teachers, it wasn't like I was always talking about foster care. My English teacher, I would just go and talk with her and just be like, hey, this crazy thing happened, this crazy high school thing happened, or like, hey, how do I, like, pay rent? Like, what system do I use? And just, like, offer that adult life information while also just being there for them as a teenager, you know? So that's what I would say.
All right, we're taking one more break. Coming up, we're going to talk about how to turn passion into action, especially when you're a young adult or student. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org. Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Nobody Trashes Tennessee, the state of Tennessee's official litter prevention campaign, managed by TDOT. Details on how to be part of the solution to end littering at nobodytrashestennessee.com.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. My guest is Ella Brinen, a young adult who aged out of the state's foster care system. Her experience led her to write a Foster Youth Bill of Rights. She's currently working daily at the Capitol, lobbying to get that bill passed into law. Ella, again, it's really fun, really great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, earlier you described the moment when you realized that you had a responsibility to other kids, your foster siblings who are still in foster care, and they don't necessarily have the resources that you have when they aged out. It's one thing to feel a sense of responsibility. It's another thing to know what to do with that sense of responsibility. How did you know what to do with it?
So for me, all of this has just been a shot in the dark. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I care a lot and I'm persistent. And so it's really it's talking to people who are system involved, whether that's youth or like caseworkers or people high up in private foster industries, like whatever. Finding the gaps and figuring out how to fill them has been really important. But realistically, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't. It's just been a little bit easier once you have like a sponsor who knows what they're doing. But yeah, really, I don't know what I'm doing.
But hey,
you just have to care. That's the most important thing. It's like caring and figuring out how to be consistent in that and not crash and burn, because it's really easy to burn yourself out. But if you can care and you can show up for a cause and you can do the research, put in the hours, all of those things, you can make a difference. And people love to hear, especially from young people. Mm-hmm. So if there are any young people who are listening to this, like, remember that your voice is arguably more powerful now. So utilize it. Do what you can to help your community, whether it's with foster care or other issues. Find what you care about, find what you're burdened by, and give people solutions. Mm-hmm. Don't just give them a problem. You got to give them the problem at the same time as you offer solutions so that they know they can do something and you can empower them to do it.
Speaking as someone who was 19 a long time ago, 99.9% of people don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
They're figuring it out day by day. And, you didn't initially, foster care is not the first thing you've advocated for. Mm-hmm. Last spring, you were helping to lead student protests on gun violence. Tell me how that happened. So actually the first protest on gun violence I went to was after the Parkland shooting. I was in D.C. I marched on the Capitol for that, the March for Our Lives. And that has been something I've cared about just growing up in public school. I'm the graduating class of the Sandy Hook victims. Mm. So this has been our reality for my entire education. It has. And that's not something I want for my siblings. That's not something I want for other kids. And especially the newest perspective I've had is getting so close with my teachers and knowing that even though I'll graduate and eventually this won't be my reality, the people I love most are expected to be EMTs, paramedics, and also teach and be social workers, all of those things. And so knowing that this is their reality has also really pushed me to get into gun reform. But I like to yell. That is what it comes down to, is I care and I can yell. So youth using their voices.
Yes, exactly.
How has your approach to advocacy changed in that last year? I mean, you're leading protests and now you're lobbying. Yeah. You're wearing those are two different hats you're wearing.
And they often conflict, where I never want to step on anyone's toes who could help me with this bill if I'm seen at a protest. So that has been interesting. Making systemic change is hard because it's a longer process and you often don't see the direct results immediately. And also, I'm not good at sugarcoating things. That's something I've had to learn. I'm not good at politics. Mm-hmm. I've learned the game. I can play the game, but I don't enjoy it. Yeah. I am more of a let's organize as a community because, again, I love seeing people come together and organizing the community around something you care about and showing out. That's what I love to do. So it's been weird navigating the transition.
I get a sense that you are really motivated by a cause that you want to champion. You're naturally inclined to speak up, speak your mind, to yell. If you're going to join a protest, you are going to lead it. You're going to get out front and say, guys, we are taking this down. We are going for this. So what advice do you have for young people or even old folks who might be a little bit more reticent?
Wait, can you repeat what you said? I'm so sorry.
What advice do you have for young folks and old folks who might be reticent to use their voices in the manner and how you had?
Does that mean hesitant. I'm sorry.
It does. It
Can you
means
cut
hesitant.
that part? I don't want to sound
No, we're
stupid.
keeping this in here. You totally, yes, it means hesitant.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. My advice would be find how you can show up, because
Okay.
everyone has a different thread that they can pull to kind of unwind this tapestry. And like, for me, it's being on the front lines. For other people, like for example, with foster care, not everyone can foster a kid, and that's okay. But there are things you are obligated to do as part of the Tennessee community. Whether it's if you don't have the time, you can be an educational surrogate with MNPS. That's something. It's like less than an hour a month where you advocate for a foster youth who needs a parent in an IEP meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of defining what you can't or won't do, let's start looking at what we can do. So you might not want to lead a protest. You might not want to be removed from the Capitol physically, which I may or may not have been.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But instead of just washing your hands of it, let's find what we can do.
Mm-hmm. I know your attention and focus is on this moment, but at 19 years old, I'm sure you think about your future.
Yes. A lot.
What are those ideas? Share some of those with me.
Okay. So the dream is to be a Nashville public defender. The women especially who have helped me to get to where I am are teachers or public defenders. And I love to argue. So I would by the time I'm applying to law school, I'll have been an intern with that office for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I love the people and I love the cause. And I love working with the Nashville community and defending the community. So that is my dream. I want to be a Nashville public defender. Then my other just kind of dumb dream is I want to do a TED Talk. That's
Oh, yes.
that's kind of just my not life goal, but it would be cool.
Look, consider this your audition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. But I do want to give back. I don't know that I'll be a foster mom. It's going to depend, but I will always, even though I don't know that foster care is going to be my whole life, I will always be involved. And my goal in everything I do is to speak up. I will never be silent if I see something that I think is wrong. And that's something I learned from the public defenders is ask why and ask it a lot. And dissent if something isn't okay or if it's taking advantage of a vulnerable group. So
if you ever consider running for office, local, state, or national, you got my vote.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Maybe.
You know, you're young and you're taking on this mission. You're going to create change. You want some advice?
Yeah.
Don't try to change the world. The world is going to change you. Take that change, influence, and inspire others to do the same.
Well, that's a bar. It's really good advice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've practiced this a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you want to leave everybody with as they're listening to this conversation?
I think the two most important things are it is not your responsibility to change everything, but you cannot wash your hands of the suffering of this world. So you need to find a way. It is your responsibility to care, and it is your responsibility to help those who are most vulnerable in our communities however you can. And as far as foster care goes, we are the community that these children need. And finding ways that your circle, your bubble can reach out and help these kids is so important. But the thing I really want to emphasize is to any former foster youth who are listening, you can do anything. There is no ceiling here. And there's just so much potential in each kid, and I don't think that they hear that enough. I think that instead they hear that they're delinquents. So I want you to hear it from me that you can do anything.
Ella Brinen, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate this. It was an honor. And look, y'all, if we're talking about the future of America, you just heard from a representative of it, and we're going to be all right. I think we're going to be all right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to you all for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Emily Siner. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation, it never ends here. So call us and comment on what you want on the show. Leave us a message at 615-751-2500 and hit us up on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.